All right, let's begin. Can everybody hear me? Fantastic. Thank you all so very much for coming to our forum on school vouchers. I want to remind everybody that this is a nonpartisan forum. The goal for tonight is to have a respectful exchange of ideas and information, because education is a deeply personal and impactful piece to all of our communities. It shapes our communities, it shapes our children, and so all of us are here because we want what's best for our communities and our children. Now, we have a couple of people that we need to recognize tonight before we get started. We have Nancy Humphrey, Plano ISD. There you are. Thank you for being here, Nancy. And then we have Paula Rosales for JP. Is it JP? Yes. 3? Yes. Thank you so much for being here.
Officer Anderson.
Oh, and Officer Anderson. Thank you so much for being here. I need to get away from there. Excuse me. You're good. Okay. So to get us started, I'd like to introduce our panel real quick. First, we've got State House Representative John Bryant, 114. Then we have Richardson ISD Trustee Rachel McGowan, District 5. We have State House Representative Vikki Goodwin, District 47. And we have Rena Honea, who's the president of Alliance-AFT here in Dallas. And I am Allison Mitchell. My team and I have organized this, and I will be your moderator and just general person up here. Sound good? Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So, okay. So, we're going to start with just a brief overview about school vouchers, what they are, how they work. And so, John, I'm sorry, Representative Bryant. This question is for you. Can you just discuss and tell us what are school vouchers? What are your thoughts about them as a member of the Public Education Committee? And how do they work in Texas? And how have they looked in other states?
Well, first, to put it all in context, Texas is 47th in the nation in its effort to support public education. Odd for the second largest state in the union and probably the most prosperous economy out of all the 50 states. The possible competitor would be California. We're 47th, and in spite of that, we just took $1 billion and put it into a competitive program to compete with the public schools. Now, let me point out, this current commissioner has approved 900 charter schools around the state to compete with public education already. We also have homeschooling going on. So now the legislature has passed a voucher program, $1 billion. They could have gone into public schools. It would have given the public schools, instead of a $55 per student increase in spending, it could have given them a $255 per student increase in spending. But instead it's going to subsidize folks that want to send their kids to private schools. It's about $10,000. It's a little bit more than $10,000 per student. When it works out, it will work out that way. $2,000 for each homeschool student, up to $30,000 for special needs disabled children. And it is anticipated that once the spending cap expires in August of 2027, it will skyrocket to $4 billion based on the experience in other states like Arizona, which has 25% of the population we have, and went from what was supposed to be $65 million to $1 billion almost immediately. A similar experience we've had in Florida as well. I would point out also that there was a dramatic increase in the number of homeschoolers in these other states when they instituted this program. All of this is a drain of students out of our public school system. In our area alone, Richardson, Carrollton Farms, Branch, Plano, Fort Worth, and Dallas have had to close campuses because of declining enrollment and competition based on public education. I would also say that that's happened even though, in say say with regard to Dallas and Richardson, the two districts that I represent, they have continued to provide an excellent public education. Richardson's kept all of its high schools in the A and B category, grade-wise. Dallas has doubled the number of A campuses and currently has the 3 best high schools in the United States based on outside objective analysis. But vouchers are not going to help us move forward. Vouchers are an ideological decision, don't have anything to do with any empirical data, indicating need. In fact, in every other state, 2/3 of the people using vouchers are people that already have their kids in private schools. So you can see who it's subsidizing.
Thank you so much for all of that information. So this next question is going to be for Representative Goodwin. Can you specifically address how vouchers may affect the students with learning disabilities and those students who are in special education and those on private health plans?
Sure. Well, the vouchers allow the private schools to decide. Is that on? Can y'all hear me okay? Okay. It allows the private schools to make the decisions who they'll accept. So they may or may not accept students with learning disabilities. The Texas Education Code is very long. I have a good friend who's a former... Is that better? Yeah. All right. I have a good friend who is a former UT professor who has been going around educating people about vouchers, and one of the things I love about him is he likes the visuals. So he has 8 reams of paper representing the Texas Education Code. That's how long and extensive it is. There are only maybe 8 pages paper put together of what applies to private schools. Now, private schools, when they take kids with learning disabilities, don't have to follow the laws around the IEPs or the 504, which if you have a child who has learning disabilities, those are very extensive laws about what the public school has to do to provide for your child. And that's not required of our private schools. Private schools don't have to accept students, they can accept them, and if it doesn't work out, they can say, okay, it's not working out, you need to go back to your public school. And I've heard repeatedly where families felt like, hey, this is an opportunity, I'm gonna send my kid to a private school, I think they'll do better, but their child ends up doing worse, and they end up coming back to the public school behind where they were. And so that's been a real problem. You know, the specialized schools, and there are some, sometimes do focus on things like students with autism or students with reading disabilities, etc. They often charge more than $30,000, and that's what the voucher will be, is $30,000, up to $30,000. Now, some of them may not charge that much, but in many cases where they're very specialized schools, the cost is very high and the enrollment's very low. And that's one of the things about private schools. That's one of the things that we heard from committee hearings is that private schools are able to have small environments, small classrooms, really give a lot of attention to these students. Well, just think how much better our public schools would be if they had the resources and the funding to have small class sizes. And I will say that I'm from Austin, I'm a representative, and there are several school districts within my district. I just met last week with one of the school districts that is having to close 3 of their schools. So whether, this is going to have an impact on all students, but particularly they're trying to say that this is going to help students with special needs. I just don't see that that's really going to be the case.
Follow up to that. For the $30,000, does that include? Would that be able to cover state therapy, state-funded therapy?
As far as I know, I'm not sure.
Okay.
To be honest on that.
I was looking into it, but wasn't sure. Thank you so much, Representative Goodwin.
But I do think current law allows, if a parent is not getting the special services that they need for their child, current state law does allow for them to go outside the school to get that and to have it covered by the school district. The only thing is I've heard that the providers have to jump through some hoops to be a part of that program. It's not really easy, so it's not always it doesn't always benefit the kids the way that we might hope.
Thank you very much. Our next question is for Ashwin. Coming to us from the staff and teacher side of things, how do you think vouchers are going to impact teaching staff and class sizes and support staff?
I could use my teacher voice, but I haven't done that in a few years. I did teach for 26 years in Dallas, though, so, and for 10 of those years I taught PE, so I know how to talk loud. The impact is going to be, in my opinion, horrendous. We are already facing deficit budgets. Last year and this year both, Dallas is in $180 million deficit operating with their funds. That means fewer teachers are going to be hired. That means that class sizes will have to increase because they don't have enough teachers to make the smaller class sizes. And it means that the support staff that are in our schools that are there to provide that support will be fewer. We have a governor that in the last legislative session in 2020, in 2022, he held on to $34 billion that should have gone to public schools, and he still has it. We did not get one dime, and I'm sure that other of the school districts can attest to that as well. So I think now that we are funding, Texas is funding in what I call 4 educational systems. Our public schools, which in my opinion, all of the money should be there, but we also have charter schools, now vouchers, and homeschools. So, or those that go to homeschool. So we're going to see larger class sizes, we're going to see fewer teachers. I have a document that I don't remember exactly where it came from. Don't defund me. In Dallas alone, there could be as many as 1,065 fewer teachers once this program is implemented because they can't afford them. That means that there'd be 1,141,585 fewer library books that our school districts have to jump through hoops to even have media equipment because of some of the laws that were just passed. Trustees are supposed to look at every book, everything, to be able to have them in their campuses. And there is a projected increase in student-teacher ratio of 7.30%. That's a huge number. If you're in our secondary schools, if you've got a student caseload of 150 or more students that you see every day or every other day, depending on your schedule, that's a huge number to have that increased. So the support staff, our teacher assistants, our cafeteria people, our custodial staff, our bus drivers, our clerical workers, there won't be as many because the schools aren't going to have the money that they need to be able to have those individuals there. So who pays the price the most? It's our students. Your children, your grandchildren, your nieces and nephews, your friends, your neighbors. Those are the ones that are going to bear the brunt of what's happened because we have billionaires that are funding these campaigns to get the money out of our public schools and go somewhere else. That's from the first book of Rena. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hodge. Trustee McGowan, on the trustee side of things, can you tell us anything about what you guys have discussed, given the legislation passing, and just your thoughts on it?
Yes. Well, in 2023, April 2023, we passed a resolution as a board that we would not support vouchers. We've agreed and I think the majority of our community, that is not going to support public schools, and public schools are already being very funded, so we have agreed to that. As far as accountability, we've talked about how private schools are not held accountable for their grades. They're not held accountable for the test, and our teachers are spending a lot of time teaching to that. So we've discussed, we're looking at defunding our schools. We have teachers that we're having to pay that are spending hours on hours teaching to a test. And we can need to do better. Thank you so much.
Let's, over here to page 2. Sorry, I'm going too fast. So, back to Representative Bryant. I'd love to get your perspective on how vouchers are going to be impacting public school funding. And by the way, I'm going to ask each of you how vouchers impact blank, and then you each have about 2 to 3 minutes to answer that. And I'll just give you a little wave. So, Representative Bryant, how are vouchers going to be impacting public school funding?
Well, it's $1 billion that could have gone into public schools. It's going to be given to, based on other states' experience, people who already have their kids in private schools, 2/3 of them. And then the number will grow. It won't be $1 billion after 2027. It will very likely jump to $4.5 billion based upon the experience in Arizona and Florida. It'll keep on going up. The real issue in Texas is whether or not the people you vote for support public education or don't. You can't have it two ways. And I can make this, I'll just make the plain statement, and the opposition party gets all upset when you say this, but you have to go with what you do, not with what they say. Is that this party, that party does not support public education. If you defund it, as they did under Governor Perry, then add the money back, $5 billion over a period of years, and then boast about how you're increasing public education. When there is no net increase, you're not being straight with the public. You're not supporting public education. When you're happy with continuing year after year after year, in which the same party has been in power, with being 47th in the nation, we went from 44th, by the way, to 47th here in 2 years in public school funding from the state level, then you're not really in favor of public education. When in spite of that, you take $1 billion and give it to private schools, and you continue to increase the number of charter schools which compete with public education, then you're not really supporting public education. 5.5 million kids in Texas are in public schools. That's where our job is, and that's where we have a legal mandate to provide a good public education. Why doesn't the other party want to do that? You know, it's because philosophically, anything that the government is doing, they're not in favor of it. That's the people who are currently in charge of that party. That's not all the rank and file people. A lot of rank and file people, like some people in this room, don't like that direction, but that's who's in charge right now.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, John, could you, what's the metric on that 47 figure? Is that per pupil expenditures?
Yeah, it's $6,160. It's called the basic allotment. It could have increased with this billion another $200. Instead, they increased the basic allotment. Remember, after all this inflation, they increased it $55.
Thank you, Representative Bryant. Trustee McGowan, can you give us the school board perspective? So what are some of the local district challenges, considerations? What kinds of responses or questions have you received from the community regarding vouchers? I think one of the largest challenges is parents just don't know. The community does not know what to expect. It's not been made very clear to districts. What does this look like? How does it affect our schools? How does it affect our teachers? How many students are we going to lose? What does that look like? As far as our demographic report, we depend on a demographic report, and that's, if we don't have students in the classrooms, we don't get the funding. So it's a very critical matter to know the facts of the program, and that's not been made very clear. Thank you very much. Representative Goodwin, can you talk to us a little bit about how vouchers are going to be impacting the taxpayers?
Yeah, well, y'all are all taxpayers, right? And I think what I hear so often is, why are my property taxes going up, but my schools seem to have less money? And particularly now, one of my districts is, actually a couple of my districts are looking at closing schools down. And so, again, taxpayers are saying, why are we paying more in property taxes and we're having to close schools down? We have, you know, a growing district for Leander. Austin is not growing, it's been steady and losing some students to charter schools and to homeschooling, but not that many, and yet they're constantly having to figure out how do we save. And at the same time, and this really makes taxpayers mad too, we're sending, Austin sends nearly $900 million back to the state in recapture. That is almost 20% of the entire state's recapture comes from Austin, comes from one district. And so you can imagine Austin taxpayers get really, really upset when they hear your property taxes are going up, you're facing school closures, and you're sending more money back to the state. So here's the thing. My first session, I remember Representative Charlie Guerin saying, this should be a 50-50 split. Should be 50% state share paying for school funding, 50% local. Is it? Absolutely not. It is, every year we see the state share decreasing and the local share increasing. Now, back in 2019, my first session, we actually bumped up the state share when we increased the basic allotment, but we haven't touched the basic allotment since then until this year when we increased it, what, $55? Nothing. And so, you know, there are a couple of our state leaders that are going around the state cheering for how much money we're putting into our public schools, which is really just a lie. It would have taken $18 billion to catch up to inflation, just to catch up to inflation, and the state put in about $8.5 billion. So we're not even keeping up with inflation. This is really hurting our schools, and that's what makes taxpayers really upset. It's like, we're paying more in property taxes. Why doesn't it seem like we are?
Thank you very much for the points.
And with regards to vouchers, I'm sorry, that's just going to make it worse. It's just going to compound the situation.
Ms. Honea, could you talk to us about how vouchers are going to specifically impact student outcomes and teacher attendance?
Well, I think you really have to look at, with fewer teachers, larger classes, management of those classes becomes an issue for some, because we have some very unruly students. And in our public schools, the doors are open for every child that enters in. We don't have the opportunity to say, we don't have a program for you, you can't come here, you need to go somewhere else. And all of these other options have that choice. So you're going to see it being more difficult with curriculum issues, learning new curriculum. If a district chooses a new curriculum, that additional pressure put on the educators makes it very difficult. I used to have teachers say, I feel guilty having a family because I can't spend time with them like I used to, because of now all of the planning, all of the preparations, having to do more unfunded mandates have come in. It requires a lot more time than what they feel like they're making to be compensatory, okay? So there's only so much money that can go around, so it becomes incumbent on the educators to give everything they've got, but they're asked to give more. So the outcomes, when you have those kinds of odds, it makes it difficult, but I can tell you, our educators in our classrooms are absolutely phenomenal. They wear the capes, whether you can see them or not, because they do the work. Their students are doing well. but there are all of these outside things that make it so much more difficult. Teacher retention is becoming more difficult because the requirements have become so increased and the pay has not kept up with inflation, like they said, so it's harder to make ends meet for their families. So it's very difficult, but I'm telling you, the ones that are doing the job you couldn't ask them to do any more, even though they're asked to do it. And many of them do it willingly, but some have gotten to the point their families have said, you need to get out. Their health has become an issue because they put those students before themselves and before their own families sometimes. So we see that over and over. So having the money even become less and defunded by going to these other entities, I think we'll see issues that have not even been thought about yet.
Thank you so much, Ms. Honey. We've reached the point now where we're going to be taking some questions from the audience. Do we have any written ones?
If you would like to use this as a place to write your question, if all of you have collected one of these from the front of the room. They're right at the front of the room, and we have someone with Yes.
We can do it two ways. You
Yeah.
can submit your question if that's how you're comfortable, or we can do a lineup with the mic if you'd rather do that.
We have a few pre-submitted.
Oh, we have a few pre-submitted
You
questions.
want to start on this side? Yeah, you want to start with that? It's on your sheet. Page 3. These came in already.
Okay, so we've just got about 5 pre-submitted ones, and then we'll do submits and one for mine. Okay, first one is for Ms. Honey about teachers. Our teachers are the backbone of our communities, but many are already overwhelmed. What is your plan to ensure that the voucher program doesn't deepen the teacher shortage or further defund the classrooms our kids rely on?
Let's start with an easy one. Because that's not it. So I think the plan is we have to hold our lawmakers accountable for what they're doing to our schools. What we're seeing, in my opinion right now, is the influx of billionaires, some not even in the state of Texas, that are pouring money into the legislative campaigns to get them elected to carry out what they want done. They feel accountable to them because they put this money in. So I think what we have to do is hold them accountable, and you do that by going to the ballot box. You know, if they are not doing the job that's not benefiting our students in the best way possible, we have to hold them accountable for that. And then I think we have to work with our school districts when the money that they have is being worked on for their budgets. We need to be a part of that. We need to be in those board meetings, in those committee meetings where they're talking about where the funds are going to go. And they don't like outside people coming in to say, but what about this and what about that? But that's our right as taxpayers to hold them accountable for the money that you're paying to go into our schools.
Thank you very much. This next question is for Representative Bryant. What happened to the rural-urban coalition of legislators who kept vouchers from passing? That was a unique and until now effective block. Did some of those legislators get primaried by the Republican Party in Texas and specifically Governor Abbott?
Yes, the answer to that is yes. In 2023, we stopped vouchers. There were 21 Republicans, as I recall, voted with us against vouchers. Governor Abbott vowed to defeat them, targeted and ran candidates against them and the billionaires that you just heard about. all came in and funded the campaign. One guy from Pennsylvania sent $6 million to the governor, which he turned around and used to beat these rural Republicans who had voted against vouchers to protect their communities. Interestingly enough, the campaign that he ran against these brave individuals didn't say vote against them because they voted against vouchers, because their polling data indicated that would be a losing message. Instead, he accused them of not supporting him on immigration and not supporting him on property tax reductions, which was completely false. Those Republicans that voted with him on immigration right down the line on every single vote, voted with him on property tax reductions right down the line on every single vote. But he used it, even though it was untrue and overwhelmed them with money. And all but, I think, 3 were defeated. We only had 2 Republican anti-voucher votes left in the House. The former Speaker, Dave Phelan, who they undermined as well, and Gary Van Dever from Texarkana, former school superintendent out there. Did he vote no? Oh, good. Drew Darby was Senate, so I didn't say that. I was mad at him for not voting with us, so I don't know anymore. So that's what happened. The questioner, the person asked the question, the answer that, I knew the answer is yes.
Thank you so much. Next question is for Representative Goodwin. The vouchers and school selection for special ed, what will be the impact of school vouchers on special education? I guess you sort of already went over that. But if you have anything else to add?
Well, I wanted to go back to the other question. So when we passed the voucher bill, it did allow for $1 billion to be spent on vouchers, but the next legislature gets to decide what happens next. So we can close the door on that. We can say no more money going to vouchers if we have the right people in office. I will say that. So, we expect that the program could grow exponentially, but that's not a given. That is not a given. But it really depends on educating people, because I think there are still a lot of people who don't know exactly what's going on with vouchers. And I just was at a meeting where I spoke to someone from Laredo. I'm sorry, not exactly the question you asked, but I just think it's important to know. So I was talking to this woman from Laredo and asking her about the schools down there. And I said, do people there care about vouchers? Do they understand the issue? And she said, you know what, I asked somebody, and I said, the person she was talking to from Laredo didn't know. And she said, well, take your best guess. She said, does it have to do with the school lunch program? Oh, wow. So we always think we often get in our bubbles and everybody knows what vouchers are, and when you say school vouchers, everybody knows what that is about, but that is not the case. And so it's really incumbent upon us to go out and educate people all over the state, make sure that they do understand that vouchers are taking money away from our public schools. Our public schools are already underfunded, they're struggling, and they really need our support. With support of the state leaders, just think how phenomenal our schools could be. We are in the most prosperous state. We have one of the largest economy, 8th largest economy in the world. We should have the best schools, and we should be funding them in a way that allows them to be the best schools.
That was my question. So about special education, first of all, I just want to say I have a child in special education, and she doesn't just have learning difficulties, she has Down syndrome, she has intellectual difficulty. And our schools are already spread thin, and they're already not doing a perfect job. And we already are asking for what we deserve and not getting it, and it's only going to become much, much worse. So I've been told, well, lucky you, you get to take your voucher and go wherever you want. But I always ask, will you please give me a list of the schools who will accept my child? Because in the city of Dallas, there's one. There's one school called Notre Dame that's downtown. That is the only school that will accept children with intellectual disabilities as per child, as my daughter. So it makes me very angry to think that these programs are going to dry up and almost disappear when we have one option.
Can I tell you something? I have a 4.5-year-old son who's profoundly autistic. And I always get choked up when I talk about it because I can see you are too, and I think especially as parents share this bond because we live in a world that is not welcoming to our children. And vouchers hits personally to people like us because we fight so hard to make sure our children have a place, to make sure that they get opportunities, to make sure that they are loved and safe when we can't be there. And to have less opportunities for them feels like a punch. And so I want to acknowledge that I am in your boat, and I hear what you're saying. And I'm sorry that we skipped your question. If I had known that it was coming from you, I certainly would have rephrased it.
Can I add
Yes,
to
please.
that?
Please go ahead.
I don't think they understand that just because vouchers might be available, these schools do not have to take them. Your religious schools and your private schools, they don't have to accept them. So your choices go even further down the list. And what many people don't understand, our public schools, for the most part, not all, our smaller districts can't do it, but there are choices that you can have. There's personalized learning. There's same-sex campuses, all girls schools, all boys schools. There's Montessori. There are all kinds of choices in our public schools that may go away because of the funding.
Thank you. Ms. Honey, I want to keep going here. This next question is again for Representative Goodwin. Is there an income cap for families eligible for the 10K voucher, and how will this need to be prioritized across income levels?
Yes, but the income cap is very high, 500% of poverty level. For a family of four, that is roughly $160,000. But it is divided into 4 different buckets, and that's just one of the buckets. So that bucket is for families with kids with learning disabilities and the income up to $160,000 for 4. Another bucket is just any kid, any student in the family is making 200% of poverty level or less. The third bucket is between 200 and 500% of poverty level. And then the last bucket is anybody. But that last bucket can only be 20%. So when I say anybody, it could be kids that are already in private school. So I guess the silver lining is at least that's not 100% or 70%, at least it's limited to 20%. But really the limitations and the buckets are not ideal. And I remember in the hearing, in the committee hearing, that James, Representative Talarico, and probably Representative Bryant as well, made the point that so there are some folks that could have an income up to $1 million or more that could access this. And the answer was yes. Well, could we cap it? And the answer was no.
Thank you so much. Next question, I'm going to give to Trustee McGowan and Representative Bryant, whoever wants to tackle it. If a student who is attending private school on voucher money gets expelled and has to go back to public school, does the money follow the student or does it stay with the charter? I've been told that the money does not follow the student. Am I correct on that?
Correct. I heard Rena said a minute ago, that I hear this is anecdotal, but I run into teachers all the time who tell about kids coming back to the public schools out of charter schools and private schools, and then they have to figure out a way to catch them up. You know, we're really not giving enough credit to the teacher force that we have in the public schools that carry this kind of burden and have to do this over and over. That's where the real education is, in the public schools.
Another question for you, Representative Bryant. You mentioned there are forces from West Texas. Let me mention a few. Tim Dunn, Ferris Wilkes out of PA, Jeff Yass, all billionaires who will profit from private schools. My question is, how does the governor expect to have an educated workforce for the 8th largest economy in the world if it's not going to fund public school?
I asked the question in the committee of the chairman, ally of the governor, doing what the governor has asked him to do here. Where's the empirical data to show the need for this? From any point of view. From the point of view of people who want to go to private schools but can't, do we have any data like that? No data. From the point of view of the workforce demand that's not being met, any data there? No data. This is completely ideological. I will have to say the governor, in my view, is being paid a full-time salary by the public to be in politics full-time, not in public policy. And that's what we see day after day. You hear him frequently talk about the Texas miracle. In 2023, we had a $30 billion surplus. Everybody's talking about surplus. As though somehow great management had resulted in $30 billion of excess funds being available. We were 44th in the nation in 2023 in public school finance. And so I said, let's move it to, I was on the appropriations committee that year, let's put in enough money to move us to 25th. We'll just be in the middle out of 50 states, just 25th, you know. I knew the answer ahead of time, but I was trying to make the point. To move us from 44th to 25th would have taken $30 billion surplus. This surplus that we have is not a result of good management. It's not even a result of good luck. It's a result of underfunding public education relative to the national average. And that point has been made over and over. They're well aware of it. They're content with it.
Thank you. This next question is for Ms. Honea. Vouchers and loss of teachers will impact the teacher retirement system. Is there awareness of this impact in the Texas legislature?
I'm sure there is. But when you have people that are in power and it doesn't affect them personally, it doesn't matter. They want to be reelected. So they're going to cater to the ones that will help fund them. This is again from the first book of Rena. But I think it will definitely, it's very impactful, and they don't care because they're getting what they want. I've often said to my friends, if people would vote in the name of their best interest and not in the name of a party, I think we could see a lot of changes come about for our kids. They're the ones that are going to make decisions for us the older we get. And we want to be sure that they've got every opportunity educationally to do the very best that they can do and be the very best they can be. We have some brilliant kids in our public schools, and we need to nourish them and instill in them the ability to do more and to do better. But if we have a limited workforce, we have not the dollars to be able to make those things happen, we're going to get what we don't want to see, in my opinion.
So can I just add a little bit to that? Do the new recruit teachers and the young teachers, do they realize also there's going to be a shortage of the retirement fund?
I'm not sure they do at this point. In the very beginning, when they start, they're so, the word I have to use is overwhelmed. It's brand new, they've had their training, but until you actually get in there and see how it really works, I don't think they understand. I know as a young teacher, I wish I had started saving in a retirement account long before I ever did. I didn't think about that. It wasn't personal to me at that point. And so I think we have to help, we as the veteran educators, we have to help them understand these are things that you need to be considerate of, but it's just like most people don't think about something until it becomes personal to them.
They're worried about their student loans, not their retirement.
Right.
Okay, we're going to move on with sort of a combo, really the guts of a lot of questions that we've been getting. So this is really open to all of you, anyone who wants to jump in. Not everybody's pleased with their public schools. We know they vary across our state. Not everyone finds success in poor performing schools, and not everyone is happy with bloated administration salaries. Some parents want a voucher option. What is your response to the parents that think this is a good thing for their families and their children?
Vote.
Yeah.
Vote. Like your life and your kids' lives depend on it. We know that where we have failing schools and lack of parental involvement with their children's education, we know that their children do poorly in schools, right? So where we see a lot of poverty, where we see the larger pools of poverty in our district, we see lower school scores, and that is the outcomes of our students. And that is what we are charged to uphold our leaders to, is the outcomes. And this voucher system helps to destroy that even further, right? If we're pulling funds out of public schools and that's going into private schools, who does that benefit? We know that doesn't really benefit the poor children in our school districts. Our district is filled, I want to say maybe 56% poverty rate of our school district. So I would say, think about that. Think about this cycle of poverty and how that continues to repeat itself and how that will continue over generations to come, how that will affect our workforce, and vote, because that's the generation and that's the future we have to look forward to.
I want to just extend that a little bit. Maybe you're getting your mic up to say something about this, but is there a way to respond to parents who, let me think, if we could say how a struggling public school eventually impacts a family who is using vouchers because their public school is failing, and they like this program and they use it, and their children end up having a better education, better choices. How does the struggling public school in their community end up affecting them?
I don't know that, if using the program works for them, then you can't say anything bad about it, in my opinion. What works for one may not work for the next. What I was gonna say is, I grew up with the saying from my mother, those who can't hear have to feel. There are consequences to everything, good consequences and bad. And maybe a voucher program will work for a few, but if you look at places that it has happened already, in Arizona, in Florida, it has become exorbitantly costly. And they're paying the price for that. And until we have lawmakers that pay attention to those things, to see the outcomes that this has happened at in other places, I think we have to hold them accountable by what has already been said. We have to vote. And we have to vote in the best interest of our students, our communities, our families. And sometimes the people that are in power, their ideas don't work for the majority. They work for very few.
Thank you.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, please.
I just like to, state once again, there's 5.5 million public school students. It is impossible for private schools to educate a significant portion of it. We're only going to be talking always about a percentage, a small percentage of the total. The focus has to be on what works for everybody. And this person who may have had a good experience with vouchers after it starts, it will be because the local school district couldn't provide what the private school provided because the local school district was underfunded. So we've got to go with our responsibility to the whole state in the future, not with these boutique situations. And that will be my response. And I'm like Rena, I mean, if you want to see the kids in private school, fine. But we have the responsibility for 5.5 million kids for public education. And I don't think we ought to be subsidizing that.
Thank you. All right, we're going to do one more submitted question, and then we will open it up to audience. Yes, okay. This is again for you, Ms. Lynn. Can President Tony and maybe Representative Bryant or anybody else who wants to jump in, talk about how it would impact public education funding and policy if teachers gained collective bargaining and strike rights. How can we make that happen?
We have to change the party in power. It is against the law in Texas for teachers to be able to collectively bargain for their contracts. It is state law that you can lose if you try to strike or if you try to collectively bargain in an organized fashion, you can lose your license to teach.
Is there any other profession in Texas that applies to?
Not that I'm aware of.
Fire.
Public state employees.
Public state employees cannot do that as well. Thanks, Rosie.
This is not supposed to be a political discussion. That is your first statement that you made. And there are other ways to improve the system of education, such as getting rid of some of the technology, getting rid of at least half of the administrators, and that would give more money to the teachers. There are other things that can be done.
Would you like to address the panel with any questions?
I still want to consider about how it could impact policy.
Well, I think for states that do have collective bargaining, the educators have had a voice in the conditions they work in, the money they make, the way the district operates, what they can and can't do. When you don't have that collective bargaining right, you pretty much take what the district offers. Now, we are very fortunate in Dallas ISD, an organization. We are a part of all of the committees that we can serve on with the district. So we do have a voice in some of those discussions. But without the collective bargaining, it's only a negotiating effort at best, and not everybody has that opportunity.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to open it up to audience questions. I think I saw your hand go up first over here. You can either come forward if you feel like you can project, just stand up and ask.
Some of it's a comment. So I really feel like Texas has a lot of swagger. It's a great place to be, great place to live, work, and play. But the swagger doesn't match the funding for public education. So it seems like we have a messaging issue with the rank and file of people like us and the people that are not in the room tonight. How do we need to market differently to them so that they understand what a voucher is or is not in Laredo or in Richardson or wherever? How do we get back? I want Texas to be a great place, but we aren't going to have workers for this Texas miracle, and economic development is going to become a thing of the past. So, kind of a comment, and I'd like your thoughts.
Well, that's a real challenge because there's been a chilling effect on superintendents or school board members or what have you in sharing opinions, and really it's giving the facts, but they're afraid, in my opinion, to speak out too loudly these days. I know a lot of superintendents that there's been some turnover because of their outspokenness in the past, and so I feel like we're seeing less of that now, and that probably trickles down to school.
Gotta have elections, gotta win elections.
I'm convinced that they want a poverty. They want they want a number. They want a number of people to be in poverty.
Okay, let's go with you, yes.
So kind of in response to that, there are figures out there, Nancy, I think you've probably heard it before too. It's not just we want an educated workforce, but there are actual financial numbers that can be assigned to that. Because if you have an educated workforce, then they get better jobs. If they get better jobs, they buy bigger houses. If they buy bigger houses, they're supporting their tax base. So there are numbers that are out there. I don't remember what those are, but that would be, I think, the best answer to that. That wasn't my thing. So I just want to acknowledge that we do have trustees here. And multiple trustees, Richardson, and I really applaud you guys for continuing to do the work and finding ways to continue to raise our kids up. I have a question for Representative Bryant. You made a point earlier that it's not what the legislators say, but what they do. So in voting, because clearly that's the big thing, is we've got to get people to vote. In voting, how do we recognize that someone is actually going to support public schools in what they do and not in what they say? So if you have advice for us for how to figure that out, I think that would be a big help.
Well, we offer amendments to the education bill, both in committee and on the floor of the House. And not very many. You don't have to look at hundreds of them. But you can look and see how each member voted on these amendments. To increase the basic allowance, for example, yes or no. To create a voucher program, yes or no. You can go right down the line on these. Virtually every issue that's been brought up here has been voted on, and see exactly how a member votes. Now, what most people vote on the basis of is those terrible cards that arrive in the mail on election time with their picture on there and just the highlights, talking in generalities about how they're fighting for this and fighting for that. Unfortunately, they get by with that. Candidates get by with that, and it's really up to the voters and up to the leaders in the community to insist that the public know what the truth is about each candidate and not vote based on a good smile on one of those darn postcards.
If I can add to that, there is an organization, I think it is called Texans for Public Education, that will look at voting records. They'll interview candidates, and then they give a rating, green, yellow, or red, depending on whether they're public school friendly or not. So that's a resource where you can look and see how the candidates are rated.
Also, Raise Your Hand Texas does that.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna move back here. Yes.
I was just going to point out towards the bitter end of the vote for vouchers, did Trump not step in and basically threaten, bribe, and target the Republican representatives, saying that if you don't vote for vouchers, that you will be primaried, and if you do, you will get his endorsement? Did that happen?
So, yeah, and actually at the very end, we knew that we weren't going to get the Republican votes that we needed to stop the voucher bill, but what we did think we had were enough votes to get an amendment to where we would put it up for a vote to the people in the state. So, making it contingent upon passing a referendum. That's my understanding, is that Trump said, if you vote for that amendment, you won't be coming back to the legislature.
I worked really hard trying to get the Republican legislators to vote against vouchers, because one, it does drive up the cost of private schools. That's something people don't talk about, but once vouchers pass, the private school will raise tuition. The money, of course, doesn't cover most schools. And also, people think that it drains the public schools. No, it actually creates a new lane of taxpayer-funded education. So we have the charter schools, which we talked about. We have the public schools. Now we have vouchers and virtual education. So we have 4 taxpayer-funded lanes of public education. Education funded, supported by the public. They are subsidies, and they're taxpayer-funded subsidies. And then I want to touch just real quick on the special ed issue, because this is a huge one. The same people who helped break the system, people like Representative Kent Grusenberg, and I can say this as a former Republican precinct chair, I'm a Republican voter. I say this, they are the same people who broke the system and came back to the legislature, and they lobbied for vouchers. They set a special ed cap, 8.5% cap, to deny children services to save money on spending for special needs kids, and that happened in 2004. So fast forward, 2 decades, this is why our special needs kids are not getting services. But the districts, they fell right in line on that. So, her district was supposed to be serving
12% or so. They had a target, so they were denying services to children because of that set by the state, the sanction set by the state, but they didn't fight back on that. So here we are, now our children are being denied services, so that's just,
Thank you for bringing that. Okay, so that people read their next brochure.
Long time educator, 23 years. I do a lot of work with Richardson ISD, with Trustee McGowan and her colleagues, in looking at teacher pay. The example that they were talking about earlier with regards to collective bargaining. I'm not a fan of collective bargaining. Well, I've never walked out with kids to make bigger paychecks that doesn't get paychecks in the first place. But to say that, there are ways to get teachers more pay, and we did that in Richardson. It took me 18 months to dive into a budget to find where the savings was. One of the 1,500-pound gorilla in the room is that in education we've increased administrative costs massively. 5 times over the last 20 years compared to increasing teacher headcount alone. Could we address a little bit of how we pare that back, and perhaps Trustee McGowan could address some of that, because I think you've been a great champion for teachers having daycare services, looking at the insurance amounts, and then working to get that pay plan passed, but by the way, eliminated that compression we saw for teachers. So the first year teacher wasn't making $6,000 less than a 30-year teacher. That has now expanded out to around a $25,000 difference, which is significant in Richardson ISD, making them the #1 paid school district in the Dallas Metroplex. That took a lot of hard work. As a teacher, I worked 2 jobs. It's a long, hard hours. And I think more of us can get engaged with our community of trustees to do that. But if you could speak a little bit towards, like, how do we get more parents to actually take the interest to go to the school board meeting? Once I was on there, anyone sitting there, and the wind blows through the room. And if I wasn't there, it would blow unaffected. So to get that engagement and to look at ways we can make that dollar go further, because we all do that in our own budgets. When inflation hit us at 21% in the last few years, we had to tighten our budgets. We had to work out what we could do savings. So I'd like to some comments on that. And we can do this without collective bargaining. We can do it without walking out on our kids. We can make it work better. We just need more voices in the room to make that happen.
Mr. McGowan, do you have a response?
So your question is, how do we get more parents involved in the room, in the meetings? Is that the question?
Yeah, like to make that engagement work better, because we haven't seen an increase at all, except during COVID when people wanted to protest masks or not masks, etc. But how do we get that to get back to that level where people care about the actual academic outcomes and for their teachers at the same time to make the whole system work, to work better? Because clearly that's the things that are broken, and vouchers was a very bad solution, but for a very real problem.
I think it's a collective effort. I don't think it's it takes community, it takes all of us to express how important that is. And as I've talked about before, where we know parents are involved, we know our students do better in schools. We have charged, as a board, we've charged our leadership to get people involved, right? We put out committee notices. We let people know where there are committees you can sign up for. I know I personally talk to community members about being and serving on those committees. That's important work. It's important to me that all of us, everyday people, right, get involved in those areas. So we have a department in our district that reaches out and does that kind of community networking with communities. So it takes a collective effort. It's not
the same people. The board of the community, we stack them, and there's preordained actions before the meeting every weekend. That's not how.
Can I?
Go ahead.
Do you have a suggestion?
Yeah, do a broader, for one, don't determine what happens in the meeting before it begins. Actually get stakeholder input, which we've given you, but it's all preordained.
All right,
That's why it goes by schools.
So I want to pivot just slightly, just because I heard a comment made a couple of times about administrator pay. And I will say that there have been some interesting bills that have not gone anywhere, but I think worth a conversation, continuing efforts, one around golden parachute. So when a superintendent leaves a district and gets paid a year and a half worth of pay, like stopping that practice. There was a bill for that, and then also a bill around how much a superintendent should be paid. Should it be more than twice what the highest paid teacher gets? Should it be, I don't know what that limit should be, but there was a representative that filed a couple of bills this session to say, let's have some sort of limitation on that. I hear that a lot. I do think in my school districts, I've heard repeatedly 85% of the budget goes towards salary, and that's exclusive of administrator pay. So really, the vast majority of a budget goes to teacher and the staff, you know, your nurse, your librarian, et cetera. So they can't say it's all teacher, but it's really all of the people that are working with the students in the school.
I'd like to add also to that is, you may not see parents in the boardrooms, but we have a robust groups of parents that serve on our PTAs at our schools, right? They serve and put in tons of hours at PTA meetings and working inside of the schools. That is parental involvement, right? So just because they don't show up in the boardroom on that night for that meeting does not mean that parents are not involved and actively involved and not paying attention and not listening, right? So social media outlets. There are many different outlets and forms that we can get in touch with parents and letting them know we need your involvement.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to address that administrative cost because we get slammed on that, especially in the news and such. I'm on the school board in Plano ISD. This is my 16th year to serve, and I know we have a very tight budget, and we manage that very well. Coming up in this current school year, we have an $8 million deficit, which is offset by the income that we're getting on selling 4 buildings. So, you know, it would be much higher. But our administrative cost ratio per student is 2.9%. So it is a fallacy to say that we have an overbloated administration. My superintendent is the CEO of a $780 million company, and she does not get a golden parachute. She does not get all of these, you know, crazy perks and bonuses, and, you know, she might have a car allowance, but, you know, if she leaves the district. But I just want to let you know that you've got to really check your facts and not believe everything that you hear in the, you know, TikTok or Facebook echo chamber. And I'm not debating. I'm just saying, look at the facts.
Okay, thank you. So, I got time for one more.
White shirt.
Just because I don't agree with saying the facts aren't in line, because they really are. I looked into this for 18 months to get the pay cash, so please don't obfuscate what I'm saying very clear. I'm very much a passionate education advocate. I put my life on the line every day. I teach for 23 years. I've done the school board meetings. I am that one voice in the room. I am that one who speaks up. And I can assure you, just look at the numbers. There's a 500% increase in administrative heads, not just salaries, over the last 20 years. That is a fact, not an opinion. And if you look at it in Richardson ISD, I'll take a great example, we have things like 10 academic coordinators. What does that mean and what do they do? So that's an example. I do not besmirch and belittle the admin in our schools. The principal, the assistant principal do a fantastic job. The folks who work with our kids do a fantastic job. But if we don't recognize the problem, if we don't address the problem, there's no way we'll ever solve it. And voucher will just take over. I can assure you, there'll be no 4-track system. There'll be 1-track. The government will steal all my money to private school and we'll all go home. That's my opinion. Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, yes, this is our last question.
I would like to say that there's a whole system for our community. To build a democracy, you have to have a system. And our education system is one part of it. But we also need to have how many kids are homeless, how many kids don't have health care and are going to be losing health care, how many parents are drug addicted and can't get drug treatment right now in this county. We have to vote to make our country work and make our county and our city work and our state. You have to pay attention. Not just vote, be an informed voter. Do your homework. Texas Tribune is free. You can get it online and download an app on your cell phone. You can do searches and get great, accurate data. It's important for us to look at our whole system and support justice for all. Every one of us is a human being. We deserve to be treated with respect. And if some people don't have what they deserve as a human being, I'm not doing my job. I invite you to do your job. This is important for our civilization, for our country.
Before we wrap it up here, I just want to say that, no matter what town hall forum is about, these things usually do get heightened with emotions, but in this specific situation, in this topic, I think it's important to remember that all of us get emotional because we want the best for our children, because we want the best for our communities, and that's where it's coming from. It's coming from the same concern that we have the best for everybody. So I appreciate all of the passion and the compassion that was here tonight. Do you have anything else?
Can I say one thing real quick? I just want to recognize how many of you in the room are educators currently. If you'd raise your hand, you're current educators. How many of you are retired educators? We have a lot. Thank you for what you do and have done, and help us get the word out. Education is power. Knowledge is power. And we only get better by educating ourselves. I did bring some handouts on vouchers, a couple of them. They came from Texas American Federation of Teachers during the legislative session. And it's just information on what a voucher is, the different names it can be under. But if you would like to have one, I do have some here. We can put them on the table. Just want to let you know.
Thank you for exiting. We can take one. So you started us off. I was going to say, could we just get some last remarks from the panel? So if that suffices for you, do you have anything else? Okay, Representative Goodwin.
Just, everything that was said, education is foundational, and I am a huge public school supporter. And, my door is always open if y'all have questions afterwards. Thank you.
If we could just keep it down until the final remarks. Go ahead, Trustee McGowan.
I would just say, education is the great equalizer, and we need to keep that in our forefront of our minds, that we cannot allow legislators to defund public education, because it is a matter of life and death for children in our country.
I want to thank Allison Mitchell for organizing this. I said I didn't keep my apple, right?
Is that your final remark, Chris? All right. Well, guys, thank you all very much for coming. Hopefully this will be the first of many of these sessions and this conversation. Thank you all.
Is there